Just a reminder, you can catch me recording this podcast live on AMP. AMP is a new live radio app that lets you call in and chat with me in person while recording. Get the app on Apple's App Store and make sure you follow me at John Middlekauff to get notified when I go live. What is going on, everybody? John Middlekauff, 3 and Out podcast. Right before Labor Day, I thought we'd do a little rapid fire, get you in and out here with some football talk, some stuff that has happened over the last 24, 48 hours in the National Football League. Subscribe to the podcast, 3 and Out, wherever you may listen. If you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe to the page. Hammer the like button. Leave a comment below. 3 and Out. We got merch, thevolume.com, thevolume.com. Go get yourself some merch, thevolume.com. And I got to tell you really quick about my friends at Gametime. Go to your smartphone, download the official ticketing app of this podcast. They go by Gametime. They happen to be the fastest growing ticketing app in America. You're going to be watching college football all weekend long, and you're going to think to yourself, I want to go to one of these games. I want to go to an NFL game this fall. I want to go to an event. Well, I got you covered here at 3 and Out. When you go to the Gametime app, you sign up for your first pair of tickets, use the promo code JOHN, that's promo code JOHN, John, and get $20 off. In these inflationary times, I got you covered. Download the Gametime app, sign up for any pair of tickets. They got interactive maps, promo code JOHN, John, that's my name. Hey, let's go a little rapid fire. Try to keep this in and out on some different topics as we head toward Labor Day. So all you hardworking individuals out there, I appreciate you. Keep on grinding. Hopefully you guys enjoy the weekend. And let's hit on some news really of Thursday and some of the stuff I guess happened on Wednesday since I last talked to you. First and foremost, Chris Ballard. I think he was in a very, very difficult situation. Not that he would have had the answers even if his owner, who, let's face it, is kind of a nut job, hadn't got involved and made some statements, while factually correct, clearly were directed at creating some chaos with, as I was told by a buddy in the NFL, when this first started, Jonathan Taylor got a new agent, and this agent likes getting dirty in the mud. He wants to create a little chaos to get what he wants, and he's willing to do that. And clearly he's talked his client into doing that as well. After Jonathan Taylor was the lone soldier to get off that phone call who has no money to show for it. It was a bunch of rich guys telling a couple other guys who were, on the fence about their franchise tag. Both of them are now taken care of, are in camp, and are rocking and rolling. And Jonathan Taylor is the only lingering situation of all the elite guys that don't have any money. Now, and Chris Ballard said this, right? Relationships in this business can be difficult because, and I watched his press conference, when you draft a player, I drafted you, I clearly like you, right? And especially the Colts, who really value character. They value high-level guys, right? But there might come a time where we don't see eye to eye, and it's gonna be, around money. So Jonathan Taylor lives in la-la land. Like, let's face it, him and his agent, disastrous tactics. It was honestly pretty embarrassing, right? They tried to use the media. No one was trading for you and paying you. And clearly no one was trading a premium pick, and they weren't just, as Chris Ballard said, giving the player away. That was never going to happen. They weren't going to be like, you know what? This guy, this isn't going to work out. Just give us a third and a fourth, take him. That doesn't make any sense. When that happens, usually at the trade deadline, it's because the team is just like punting on the contract. Well, Jonathan Taylor's contract is conducive to any team. Now, I love it when some of the reports were like, the Colts asked for Jalen Waddle back. They had no intention of trading him. None. Because they knew nobody was going to offer them a first-round pick. So you could offer, hey, we'll give you a third that could potentially turn into a 2. That they were never going to do that. Now, they kind of played to the ego of the agent, like, oh, yeah, go seek a trade. Good luck. Godspeed. We're in this business. We know how it's going to go. It's going to turn out crickets. And some of these reports of, like, the Eagles, Google the Eagles' history. Like, they were never trading and paying for him. What's the point, if you're Jonathan Taylor, of getting traded and not getting paid, right? So I think a lot of these teams were interested in doing the trade without paying. But let's face it, where he sits right now, it's not in an ideal situation. For years when I worked, with the Eagles and in the pro scouting department before I went to, college, I was in free agency meetings. And the first thing you go over beside the player is injury history and playing time. Why did he miss X games? Why did he miss this many games that season? And you have basically a program of information that you're constantly inputting. Now it's probably much more digitized and just, I would say, self-sufficient than at the time you had to have someone, the lowest guys on the totem pole inputting injuries. Well, in the last 21 games, because last year were 17 games, and we know going to miss the first 4 games this year because he's on PUP, he'll have played in 11. And his value, like when you miss half the games, so he's gone through a stretch now of a year and a month where he's played in just about half the games. That's a major red flag. The number one advice I would give him and to his agent, that clearly they're still dealing with some pain in the ankle, not ideal, get back on the field, play well. That's the only way to increase your value, because your value right now is you've hurt it. 1, with the injuries, 2, with this situation, and 3, just MIA when the games are going on. In the NFL, you're paid to play games. That's the whole point of this entire business. The games pay for everything. It's how the players get paid, by performing in the games. And when you don't play in them and you go through a stretch of 20 plus games and you've played in half, it's not good. It's not good. Now, I don't know, I do believe Chris Ballard when he says, I love this guy. I'm not trying to have some contentious relationship. And that's where the kooky owner throws a curveball and a wrench in the situation and made it worse. And everyone around the league knew it when he made those comments, even if they were factually correct. There's just no need for that. So this situation is going to be interesting to watch it play out. My number one question mark is when does this guy get back on the field? When does he prove he's a really good player? Because going into the season, think about some of the running backs. We have pretty high hopes for a lot of them. Saquon, expect a big season. Josh Jacobs, expect him to keep rolling. Christian McCaffrey, stud. Nick Chubb, baller. A lot of the guys that are being paid premiums, they're ready for week 1. They're going to get a bunch of carries and throw the ball a lot and produce. That's what they're paid to do. And we're going to look at the Colts, who, probably weren't going to be that good of a team, especially with a rookie quarterback who, might struggle to complete some passes, is going to be nowhere to be found. And, he can pout all he wants. He can be mad all he wants. Bro, you got to get that ankle fixed. You got to get right. Because, wait, a team was going to trade for you? Were you going to pass a physical? Were you going to be ready to go week 1? Or is it just an injury that impacts the Colts? Because if that's the case, not that every team acts just because you are not happy with your situation, if I were to get you, maybe you would turn happy. But that's a little bizarre. I mean, the situation has, I would say, obviously been out of left field for, based on this player's history and his background and his character and just the way he's operated. And I'm not saying you're a bad character guy because you're fighting off money or fighting for more money. It's big boy business, so you should fight. The only one who truly cares about you is you. I think sometimes the agents, they care about the player, but they're really, their motive is sometimes they can, come out of left field because they really want to get the highest number possible to get themselves paid. But sometimes those numbers that they're shooting for are just beyond unrealistic and are going to create a problem that doesn't need to be there. So this situation jumped the shark a while ago. You could see the pain and agony on Ballard's face. How did I get into this? And the reason you get into it, because when you work for an owner like this, the situation at any moment can, instead of just be cruising down the freeway, can just be, a complete and utter pile up and crash. And then everyone in that crash is on fire. And that's what it feels like in this situation. So it's going to be fascinating to watch here in 4 weeks what happens, but he's got to get back on the field and he's got to prove that he's still an elite player. Otherwise, just people aren't going to be breaking the bank for, I don't know, a running back. That's not usually the way it works. I've been banging this table for a while. The Rams are screwed. I think they are going to be so bad this year. And Sean McVay announced today that Cooper Kupp is still dealing with the hamstring injury. And it's still day to day. He's not really in great shape. Not that he's not in great shape, but he's not in great shape in terms of being healthy and ready to roll. So I went to ESPN.com and I clicked on the Rams. I'm like, what are their first couple games? They open at Seattle. Then they play the 49ers. Then they play the Bengals. They are staring 0-3 in the face. Then they get the Colts, but if the Rams aren't good, playing random teams doesn't mean they're any means to be a lock. especially on the road. And then they play the Eagles. So the opening of their schedule, you could look up and they could be 1-4 before you even blink. And if shit really hits the fan, 0-5 is on the table. I would say best case scenario would be 2-3. This team, to me, has always been a powder keg just because they're paying so much money to three guys. And one of the three of them is injured with a soft tissue injury. It's very, very difficult sometimes to overcome those hamstring injuries. We've seen it for years with skill guys because they have to open their gate and let it rip. This is a guy whose game is predicated on explosion and quickness to get open. It's what made him 2 years ago, have one of the great seasons we've ever seen. And Stafford, who currently is healthy and can't figure out anyone's name on his own team, don't totally blame him. We talked about the situation with the phones. But I actually have less faith that Stafford's going to play in more games than Cooper Kupp. And I don't care if Aaron Donald goes 2019 version of himself. Like it's very, very difficult if the rest of the guys around you stink. You could have Reggie White in his prime. If the other 10 guys look like me or you, you're not going to hold the other team to many points. I don't care how much Reggie White, Lawrence Taylor, Ray Lewis is making play after play for you. You can only do so much as an individual. Part of being a really good defense is having countless guys at every level. And I don't see it. I think the Rams, I think you're looking at a 4-win team. A headline that I saw that I think this guy, it's weird. Like I haven't talked much about this player. The situation a couple years ago, I was completely just uncomfortable with, right? And I always am uncomfortable with allegations. He said, she said. Like no one knows except those two people. But one thing that was not deniable, and I would imagine a lot of people listening to this have gotten massages before. Some of you, might have got, I don't know what kind of massages you've gotten. It was the number of massages and therapists that this guy was going to. It's one of the biggest red flags I can remember. So I'm not trying to act like I know what happened on all of these massage tables, but I knew something was a little off. That is not, you can't even argue that. It is not debatable that Deshaun Watson proved to be a red flag, even if he's not guilty of what they were alleging he was guilty of. Like, bro, what are you doing going to 75 massage therapists in the state of Texas? Can't you just find one that knows what she's doing? Well, of course you can't, because we kind of knew, I get what you're doing there, bro. He gets traded. He gets $230 million. Well, last year they fudged the salary cap because they knew he was going to get suspended, and they gave him $1 million, meaning they owe him $229 million. He was named captain today. Most of these teams have 5 to 7 captains. Now, my question is this. Are you going to be any good? Or are you just going to be the guy that had all the massage therapist issues? And somehow your girlfriend at the time, stuck with you? Probably a little easier when you get the $230 million coming your way. Most women I know probably would have left after those situations. But because it wasn't like, I didn't do it. It was just like, it was consensual. So it's like, wait, you were doing, it is what it is. But he's named team captain. And I just think there's a lot of pressure on this guy. $229 million. Every penny's guaranteed. That's what they owe the guy. This feels like an NBA deal, right? And an NBA deal is one thing when you sign the Giannis's and the Jokic's and the LeBrons and the Currys. You're like, listen, the only way this deal's not working if they have a major injury. If they're playing, we feel fantastic. But then the NBA, they're all those second tier guys that you start paying enormous amount of money. It's like, wait, I got to give Jaylen Brown $300 million. Like the guy. Can't we give him 140? It's like, no, the max is the max. It's like, well, he can't dribble. He's a really good player. I want to keep him. Cool with paying him $30 million. No, you got to pay him $65 million a year. You're like, what? And that's what this one feels like to me. Because even if he's good, I don't know if he's ever living up to the contract, but at least if he's good, they will be a functional franchise. I just think the pressure on him is beyond immense. And they start by playing divisional opponents. I think by week 2, they're Monday night against the Pittsburgh Steelers. We're all going to be watching that bad boy. Their coach is clearly on the hot seat. Their team is really talented around him. But that contract, it's weird, right? This guy, when healthy a couple years ago, was a really good player. But the way every single human universally talks about this contract, and rightfully so, is that's a terrible deal, right? So how's he ever going to be a top 5 quarterback? If he can just get back into the top 10, I mean, obviously last year, he was one of the worst players in the league. Watched him a little in the preseason, just following some of the preseason hype. Or you're just, their stories around the Browns. For some reason, The Athletic funnels me a lot of their stories. I don't know what to think. I would probably short the Browns because of the head coach, and just because I don't know if you ever shake what happened a couple years ago. Some have, but many have not. Obviously, not that individual situation. I think this could get weird. I would, and part of it's the franchise, part of it's who they are, part of it's the lack of stability with the coach. Part of it, I think, is did the coach and GM ultimately want this player? Obviously, Deshaun Watson is better than Baker Mayfield, but were they behind the money, the trade? Like, that's an owner thing. That's, Flying J, Jimmy Haslam, who, you could argue is one of the worst owners in the league. I've been saying this for a while, is I think the league, if they could, would get rid of Michael Bidwell so fast, it would make your head spin. They want no part of this guy owning the team. They're currently an embarrassment. All the NFLPA stories last year when they did the polling or whatever around the league, and the information coming out that he was charging them to go boxes, charging your own players to go boxes. Like, he's my entire life. I remember being a kid when the Niners were really good in like the Eddie DeBartolo days. I mean, they were such a laughingstock. They were the equivalent of like the Oakland A's, but never won like with Billy Beane. But they were like that in terms of being cheap. They were just a joke. They were a complete embarrassment. And they've had some moments with Kime, with Arians, a couple years ago when they started 8-9-1 with Kyler. But they're currently an embarrassment again. Obviously, they're going to be really bad. I talked about this the other day. I have no problem with them cutting Colt McCoy. I would have done that as well. He's a 37-year-old guy who's barely played in the NFL for the last decade. People are acting like they cut Peyton Manning. But Steve Wilkes the other day, if you remember, they had an executive, McDonough, who sued the team and basically said wrongful termination, but was coming at, said, like, I know where some bodies are buried. Some shady shit happened. And one of the things that he, in the lawsuit, had said is that when they suspended Steve Keim, remember you got the Dewey in Scottsdale, you couldn't have any contact. You have to go away. I don't know. I forget what it was, 5 games, 4 games, 8 games, whatever his suspension was. Well, one of the things Steve Wilkes, who was the coach at the time, remember, he was a one-and-done guy. It was the Josh Rosen year, said, like, I don't know if it was under oath. I mean, he's not in front of, like, the Supreme Court here, but clearly through arbitration or whatever through the league, said that not only did the owner say that to continue to have contact with Steve Keim, gave him like a bat phone. And one of the things Steve Wilkes was saying is like, this is my first year as a head coach. It's taken me so long to get this opportunity. I was very uncomfortable with the whole situation. Now, it's not like he originally ratted on him, right? Snitches get stitches, but he definitely was not hesitant to tell the truth here. And people, I've seen a lot online like, oh, they're going to strip them of draft picks. I think this is their opening to get rid of this guy because I live here now. I'm telling you, this area reminds me a lot of California 20 plus years ago. The amount of money and companies that are going to flow here on the West Coast, hell, affordability, it used to be much more affordable. It's getting more and more expensive by the day because the amount of people moving here. This place is just going to turn in. It already is just a complete cash cow. And the upside for the league to be in this market and how underwhelming it is with this individual. If the Phoenix Suns could sell for $4 billion, I think this team, I thought it was crazy that the Washington football team, I mean, how'd that thing not sell for 10? You can't convince me. If the Phoenix Suns can go for 4, this team can't go for 8. Not in this market with the amount of money here, with the amount of just people that want to live here, in terms of free agency. This would be one of the more desired places for ownership. And to think that the league is only going to go after, like, I'll just strip him of a first-round pick. I think they're going to try to end this guy. I've been saying forever. The 2 places that the league would love to put in new powerful owners would be the desert. And that's Arizona and that's Vegas. And I saw a report today of the amount of money the Raiders are making because of their move. Of course they are. Oakland's an all-time dump. They've had 3 teams leave that place in a 5-year span, right? I mean, the A's haven't officially left, but they're going to. You can't do business there. So you go to a place like Vegas, you're immediately going to make more money, and especially get out of the 49ers umbrella. Just because you're, making money because you go to a place that's much more profitable doesn't mean that the guy in charge knows what he's doing or the league wants him there. And there was a visual last week because Tom Brady, I don't know the percentage, but now has, Mark Davis gave him a little piece of the pie. I don't know if Tom would ever have enough money, right? What are the Raiders worth now in Vegas? Like the Cardinals, $7-8 billion. Hell, I think if you just said, hey, the Vegas Raiders are for sale, open bidding. Now, the problem is there are only so many human beings that have the means to buy a team. So it's not like every, swinging dick can make an offer. But I do think you get $10 billion. No state income tax, the strip. It's just, you get 8 in Arizona, 10 there. Now, I don't know if that's what it would sell for, but Tom doesn't have $10 billion, doesn't have $8 billion. But I think they would love to get new ownership in both places. And that's an educated guess. That's me knowing some things. Now, not saying that's going to happen anytime soon. Clearly, Mark in the league office didn't quite see eye to eye on all the Gruden stuff. We'll see what happens with the Gruden takedown of the league office. But I definitely think this Bidwell situation with Keim and the bad phones, that's their opening. That's their opening, and I would expect them to take it. And the Pats. A couple days ago, they cut all the quarterbacks. And I said at the time, like, I wasn't going to, it was hard to have a take because we have to wait to see who they would claim. We have to wait, like, are they cutting these guys? They brought them both back. So wouldn't you just, if you keep the guy on your active roster or you get the guy to your practice squad, you put him on the practice squad so you keep other guys on your active roster. I was like, I was going to be critical of Bill, and then I was like, actually kind of a genius move. Now, you couldn't go into week 1 against the Eagles with only one quarterback. Like, you would have to activate one of those guys. So it's kind of fudging the books a little bit. But today they officially claim Matt Corral, who, Bill O'Brien would have had a front row seat a couple years ago when he had his best year for Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss when Bill was at Alabama. So he would have pretty extensive scouting reports from his days at Alabama. Obviously, Bill is very tight with Saban, who would have been a huge part of the defensive game plan against Matt Corral. I'm sure they clearly scouted him coming out of college. But yeah, so the Pats now officially have, at least as of recording this, maybe they will get rid of either Bailey Zappi or Cunningham. Now, Cunningham's kind of a hybrid, so Bailey Zappi is a true quarterback. Like, it's the only position he could play. But the Pats have 2 quarterbacks now. Mac Jones, Matt Corral, loading up on SEC players. And then just a couple other little things before we get out of here. This is pretty concerning, man. This is a big year for Chase Young. Obviously, it's the last year of his contract. I guess I watched their first preseason game, but he had a stinger in that game, and he has not been clear for contact since. So this is a guy who's dealt with, the knee injury, didn't get right, and now he's got the stinger operation. I don't think he was ever, best case scenario, going to be Myles Garrett or Nick Bosa or that level of player, but I thought he was going to be a pretty good player. Much more power-based, kind of like a poor man's version of Khalil Mack. But his career's not going well, and obviously a huge reason for that right now is the injuries. So the stingers, the knees, it just feels like a career that's not materializing because his body's letting him down. TJ Hockenson, who remember last year was traded to the Vikings, had been wanting an enormous contract. Whenever a contract breaks, you can tell me it's $70 million, but who knows how much is guaranteed. The best part, I actually think there's a Moneyball element of this. When you get sweet linebackers, when you get sweet safeties, when you get sweet tight ends, even running backs. Because if I get George Kittle or Hockenson or Kelsey or Christian McCaffrey or Fred Warner or Luke Kuechly or whoever, the amount of money I actually have to pay them relative to tackles and defensive linemen and quarterbacks and wide receivers is dramatically less. And the amount I have to guarantee them is way less. So I actually think there's value, and I said this a while back with my thought on tight ends in the draft. If you hit on them, it's a double whammy. You get them on their rookie contract, which isn't that much. So if it's like a Kincaid with the Bills or Mayer with the Raiders, and then if that guy hits and becomes a Pro Bowl level player, the amount you have to pay him relative to star tackles, star quarterbacks, star defensive linemen is dramatically less. It's why I think the Chiefs are in this conundrum of Chris Jones wants all this money. They know they need Chris Jones, but one of their best players, Travis Kelce, just doesn't make any. Now, part of that is because he's given them discounts because he loves playing there. But still, when you start paying Chris Jones 2.5, 3x what you're paying Travis Kelce, that does open the door for potential problems just in the locker room. Like, we're all, let's face it, men judge ourselves, a lot of us at least, not every single one, on money, right? And that's how we equate success or failure, and especially relative to our peers in our industry, right? And what makes pro sports way more unique than most things we all do is we know exactly how much the guy to the left and the guy to the right of us makes, right? Every single human, whether you're a player or whether you're just a fan, you can Google how much everyone's making. You walk into work tomorrow, you might have an idea, but if you're not the guy, cutting the checks, you don't really know. And people can always lie to you. Like, you know exactly how much, if you're Travis Kelce, everyone on your team makes. And I don't even need a printout from Brett Veach. I just go home and, type into Spot Track into my computer the Chiefs roster. So I do think it's a slippery slope when you have locker room dynamics and paying some people and not paying others. And this is the issue with the running backs. It's like the market's the market. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. And last but not least, one thing that changed when I was in the NFL, being on the practice squad, a lot of it was age-based. It was a little like a red shirt in college where, I think the rule, and that rule's changed as well, too. When I was at Fresno State, you could play up to like 3 games as on any given year and still redshirt, or maybe it was a percentage of snaps, but you couldn't get past a certain threshold to keep a redshirt year. It was no different with practice squad. And it used to be, when I was in the NFL, if you played in like a couple regular season games, your practice squad eligibility was shot. And it screwed so many young people, right? Because they would be on bad teams or there were injuries, and then they would play, but they actually probably shouldn't have been playing. They should have been, on a practice squad or essentially redshirting that year and improving. And then they would get to a point where they actually weren't good enough. They couldn't make an active roster, but they had lost practice squad eligibility, and then they were just out of the league. That happened all the time. Well, now when you look around the NFL, there are a ton of older players who are like, oh, Willie Snead, Melvin Gordon. I mean, those are just a couple names that come to my mind. Whoever's listening to this, I bet your team has a veteran or two on their practice squad. And that, to me, is a really good move by the league, that there should be no requirements to be on the practice squad. If I want to keep Tom Bally or Jason Peters on my practice squad and they're 40 years old, I should be able to do that. Obviously, I don't have to pay them as much, but that should be allowed. And that clearly is allowed, at least to my knowledge. I'd have to ask like someone in the league. I don't think there are any requirements on like I can have older players. Maybe there is, but in terms of the amount of them, but clearly you're allowed to have some. And I think that's a smart move. And I think that's really beneficial to young players, right, who might get a shot early, it not go well, and they're really more suited for the practice squad, and they're not going to be able to make teams 53. It keeps their careers alive. And who knows, maybe in a couple years, they're able to go on to have like a 7-year, 53-man career, because that's the goal, right? You want to play, right? Being on practice squad is cool if you're 22, 7th round pick, you're making $200,000 a year. But after a year or two, like, you want to make the big squad. You want to make $800,000, $900,000 with a chance to get on the field, prove your worth, and who knows, maybe you become a, functional starter in the NFL for 7-8 years. So there's a big line, but I think the league made a really, really smart decision with lessening those requirements to get on the practice squad.